Think about someone whose opinion you do not respect, someone whose judgment you find shallow. You know you are not supposed to care, and yet some part of you does reliably every time. That is not a personal failing. That is something far older than you, and the real explanation for it is stranger than anything you have ever told yourself. The starting point is not psychology. It is evolution. And to understand where this particular hunger comes from, you need to go back to a world where the stakes of social rejection were not hurt feelings. They were death. For the vast majority of human history, your ancestors did not live in cities or towns or even villages in any stable sense. They lived in small, mobile bands of roughly 20 to 50 individuals. These groups were everything. They were your food supply, your protection from predators, your childcare network, your medicine, your shelter, your entire support system. Outside the group, a single adult human had almost no realistic chance of surviving alone for long. Not because people were weak, but because the environment was genuinely brutal, and survival in it required cooperation at a scale one person simply could not replicate alone. You needed the group, not abstractly, concretely, daily, in ways that touched almost every hour of your existence. The evolutionary psychologist John Tooby, along with his colleague Leda Cosmides at the University of California, Santa Barbara, spent decades building the case that the human mind was not designed for the modern world. It was designed for that world, a world where being liked, accepted, and valued by the people around you was not a social nicety. It was a survival variable as real as access to water or proximity to fire. And in that world, the cost of losing standing in the group was not embarrassment, it was exclusion. And exclusion, even slow and partial exclusion, could end you. In that world, every member of your band had influence over your life. Not just the people you liked, not just the people whose values aligned with yours or whose judgment you trusted. Every single person in that group had some power over whether you were fed, whether you were warned about danger, whether someone sat with you when you were sick, whether you were included in decisions, whether your children were accepted or subtly sidelined. And being pushed to the margins, even quietly, even gradually, could be a slow death sentence with no single moment you could point to as the cause. This is why your brain did not evolve to selectively monitor the opinions of people you respect. It evolved to monitor everyone. The neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman at UCLA has spent years studying what happens in the brain when social connection is threatened. His research, summarized in his book Social, argues that the brain processes social pain using many of the same neural circuits it uses to process physical pain. Being rejected, excluded, or negatively evaluated activates the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the same region that fires when you stub your toe or press on a bruise. This is not metaphor. Your brain is not treating social rejection as similar to pain. It is treating it as pain, routed through overlapping hardware. Because for most of human existence, being cast out of the group was as immediately threatening to your survival as a physical wound. Both required urgent attention. Both demanded a response. The circuitry that handled them did not need to be separate, and that threat detection system does not check credentials before it activates. Here's what that means in practice. Your nervous system does not pause when it detects a negative signal from another person and ask whether that person's opinion is worth caring about. It does not run a quick assessment of whether you actually respect their judgment, or whether their values align with yours, or whether their own life is in enough order that their criticism of yours carries any weight. It registers the signal. It flags the potential threat. It sends the alert. The cognitive evaluation, the part where you remind yourself that this person does not matter to you, comes afterward. And by then, the emotional response has already begun. You are already in it. You are already feeling it. And now you are trying to reason your way out of something your body started before your conscious mind was even invited to the conversation. Roy Baumeister at the University of Queensland has studied this asymmetry for decades. His research on what he calls the negativity bias shows that negative social information is processed more quickly, encoded more deeply, and influences behavior more strongly than positive social information of equivalent intensity. A single dismissive comment from someone you barely know can outweigh 3 genuine, heartfelt compliments from people you love and trust. Not because you are irrational or insecure in some personal, pathological sense. Because your brain was built for an environment where missing a negative signal, failing to notice that someone in the group had turned against you, could get you quietly frozen out before you understood what had happened. And missing a positive signal just meant you did not feel quite as warm for a while. The cost of false negatives was historically catastrophic. The cost of false positives was merely uncomfortable. So your brain defaulted to a policy of caring, always, universally, about everyone in proximity, regardless of how you consciously evaluated them. The actual work, if there is work to be done, is not to stop caring what people think. That goal is both neurologically unrealistic and, if you somehow achieved it completely, would make you socially dangerous rather than free. The sociometer exists because social connection is real, because reputation and relationship carry genuine consequences even now, even in a world vastly larger and more anonymous than the one your ancestors inhabited. The work is something more precise than simply not caring. It is learning to notice when the alarm has fired, to pause in the gap between the signal and the response and ask, is this threat real in the present? Or is it a transmission from the past playing through hardware that cannot tell the difference? It is the difference between letting the alarm drive your behavior automatically and using the alarm as information, as data, as a starting point for a deliberate choice rather than an involuntary reaction. That gap between the alarm and the behavior is where conscious agency lives. It has always been a narrow gap. In the ancestral environment, a narrow gap was the right design. You did not need to deliberate at length about whether the social threat was worth taking seriously. It almost certainly was. But you are not in that environment, and you have a capacity your ancestors did not have in quite the same way. You can observe your own responses. You can name what is happening inside you. You can hold the feeling and interrogate it instead of being carried by it. That is not a small thing. That is, arguably, one of the most distinctly human things you can do. Think again about that person whose opinion you do not respect. The one whose comment sat with you longer than it should have. The one you told yourself did not matter, even as some part of you proved otherwise. Your brain did not malfunction when it noticed that comment and held it. It did exactly what roughly 170,000 years of social evolution built it to do. It registered a signal from another member of the group. It assessed potential threat. It sent the alert. It kept you tuned into someone who, in another time and another world, might have had real power over your survival. The alarm was never the problem. The alarm kept your ancestors alive long enough to become your ancestors. You are just the first version of your species that gets to decide what to do next.